περιστέρια δεν έχουν πατρίδες. Τα περιστέρια πετούν πάνω από τα σύνορα. Ερωτεύονται πάνω από τα σύνορα. Χορεύουν πάνω από τα σύνορα. Και ύστερα χάνονται στα βάθη του ουρανού. Ο στρατιώτης στη Λαχώρη έγινε φύλακας των συνόρων στον Εύρο, αστυνομικός στην Ομόνια, σκιά πάνω σε τοίχο, στα πετράλωνα και στα πατήσια. Έβγαλα τα ρούχα μου και κοιτούσα πέρα, μακριά. Ένιωθα τα χέρια του Φαντά Χαλί να αγγίζουν τα πόδια μου, λες και ζητούσε να πιαστεί από κάπου. Τρόμαξα.
Πακιστάν δεν έχει ζωή, δεν έχει τίποτα εκεί. Δεν μπορούμε να τα ζήσουμε εκεί.
Δίπλα του ήταν αναποδογυρισμένο το κίτρινο ποδήλατό του, πρόλαβε να φωνάξει βοήθεια.
Μπορείς να σκοτώσουμε εμένα, τι να κάνουμε, πες το εμένα τι είναι ζωή. Θα έρθει η μαμά, θα έρθει η μπαμπά, θα έρθει η αδέρφη του, ποιος θα έρθει εδώ μένα. Κανένας δεν θα έρθει.
Well, foremost, Thomas and Lefters, thank you so much. I know it's incredibly late in Greece and you're still with us. Thank you so much. Appreciations. Well, greetings to all again. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming and joining this wonderful film screening. I'm Cemre Ülker, representative of the Journalists and Writers Foundation to the United Nations. JWF is an international civil society organization dedicated to the culture of peace, human rights, and sustainable development. We work towards the implementation of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, by creating intellectual platforms, generating knowledge, disseminating information, and developing inclusive policy suggestions for the United Nations. As we now proceed to the discussion section of our film screening event today, on the occasion of the World Human Rights Day, I would like to start by extending my heartfelt appreciation and thank you notes to our partners, as this event is co-organized by the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg, JWF, Greek Council for Refugees, Peace Islands Institute, Pennsylvania, and the Central Penn College. We have an amazing audience here in the room, aside from the virtual ones at Zoom, and more audiences will join later as we disseminate this event's proceedings at the World Affairs Council and the Journalists and Writers Foundation. So thank you so much to all for your kind contributions and presence. Well, we will be spending the next 30 minutes with Dr. Thomas Sideris, Lefteris Papagiannakis, connected to us over Zoom, and I'm pleased to share the stage with Joyce Davis with me here, and then we will proceed to the Q&A session. And participants at Zoom are also more than welcome to join us with their comments, questions. Please be active. I'll be reading those through my phone here. And I will start by posing some timely questions to my speakers tonight, as I'm pretty sure they will all bring a distinct perspective, but I'll first share some of my reflections with you on this important day, the Human Rights Day. Many of you may have already been knowledgeable about the Sustainable Development Goals, a very comprehensive agenda, including human rights targets varying from climate change to refugee rights, gender equality, peace, just, strong institutions. And these 17 goals, with a very ambitious deadline of 2030, they will most likely to remain as a promise in peril because of the unprecedented rise of conflicts across the globe. And this year only marked the historic high in terms of civilian casualties. And the Economics Democracy Index also notes that 40% of the global populations are living under authoritarian regimes, 40%, in addition to 15 living under hybrid regimes. So in parallel lines, we observe the 20th year of decline in global state of democracies too. So on top of the resurgence of armed conflicts, gender apartheid regimes, increasing economic inequalities, the camp of entrenched autocrats are really elevating a climate of intimidation and persecution, which resulted in 117.3 million forcibly displaced individuals worldwide. 100 million, over 100 million reported by the UNHCR. And this number reflects an 8% increase when it's compared to only last year. Terrific numbers, really. And this plightful result is the consequence of failure to uphold international peace and security. Some more statistics that I would like to share with you because it really reflects on the discussion today. The European Union Agency for Asylum reports that while Afghans have the second largest applicant group in the EU following Syrians, the recent data indicates a significant shift as well. Turkish applicants have doubled, more than doubled in fact, compared to last year. As a human rights advocate monitoring Turkey, I must acknowledge this reality as the extreme political repression in Turkey, oppressing all forms of civil, social, political, economic rights, shrinking space of journalists, media, human rights defenders, and all-time high reporting of the femicide, violence against women, are inducing people to leave their homeland. And these days, I would say any opposition voice is muted in Turkey. But recently, this was a very important development. A group of UN special rapporteurs raised their particular concern over the alleged measures of systemic repression against persons affiliated with the Hizmet movement through the misuse of legislation and its impact on civil society, human rights defenders, political dissidents, and journalists are devastating. Since the last decade, tens of thousands of families are leaving Turkey, forced to leave Turkey, including professionals, highly resourced professionals from all walks of life, through life-threatening journeys in which many, including children, unfortunately lost their lives in the cold waters of Evros River. While Greece has been a safe haven to many, thankfully, there have also been many cases where the international human rights norms, the Refugee Convention, was breached through brutal pushbacks, including physical and sexual violence, which we have also seen some of the shots from the Philos shipwreck. And the gas station presents the stories from a Pakistani perspective, but we know that their resilience, the hope to rebuild their lives from scratch is a really shared story of all refugees, regardless of their country of origin. Now, I'm pretty sure we will focus more on different country cases. I'll bring the perspective of US to the table as well. But now I would like to move on with Dr. Thomas Sideris, who is the investigative journalist and the award winner, producer of this wonderful human rights documentary. Dr. Sideris recently earned his doctorate in human geography. He is the creator of over 40 documentaries, films on human rights advocacy featuring refugees and migrant testimonies from Greece as well as other European countries. He has received more than 30 awards for his documentaries across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the USA. We are also proud to have Dr. Sideris as our advisory board member at the Journalists and Writers Foundation. He was also recently listed among the nominated journalists for the 2024 European Journalist of the Year list. So, Thomas, I believe you hear me. You have a devoted journalism career and a film production journey that is globally recognized. And you have been working tirelessly to raise awareness on these plightful, grave human rights violations. And you have, in fact, worked with a variety of communities. You covered the case of Armenians forced to leave their homelands, worked on displaced Kurds. You have even extended your horizon to Latin America, as you highlighted Haitian refugees in your film, Marabu. So let's start with this question. Please share your reflections with us on the importance of highlighting these personal stories, bringing a human perspective to the table? And what difference does it make when we hear the resilience stories of these refugees? How does personalizing this human rights agenda help mitigate this global crisis?
Thank you, Zebre, for your question. Can you hear me? Zemre, can you hear me? I think, can you hear me? Now I cannot hear you.
Let's
I lost the connection.
You did?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, good evening from Athens. I thank all the foundation for their help and support in my cinematic work. I especially thank my tireless and resilient colleague Joyce. It's a great honor for me to say that I'm colleague with Joyce. I will try to keep my answer brief and to the point. Now, regarding your question, Jemre, a single film certainly cannot change the world. Even many films together cannot change the world. If only we filmmakers could bring about social and political change, civil society can achieve goals. However, a film can raise awareness among citizens, make them think differently, speak about invisible people and insignificant things that in reality are significant. Take, for example, Pakistani migrants, many of whom clean car windows at road intersections when cars stop at traffic lights, hoping drivers will give them a few cents. That is their work. That is their livelihood. I don't remember if this happens in the US. However, most drivers look away, not wanting to see the poverty beside them. We avoid talking about death because we are fearing. We avoid talking about poverty and migration because we fear these realities. But poverty and migration are here. And these two, poverty and migration, go hand in hand. Now, with my films, I aim to make these people visible and address xenophobia, Islamophobia, and the complex issue of migration. Unfortunately, this effort does not always succeed. The reception of the film in Greece was disappointing. I think not many people in my country care about the issues of migrants, particularly Pakistanis. Many colleagues told me, you shouldn't have made this film. Pakistanis are a problem. But in the faces of the film's protagonists, I didn't see Pakistanis. I saw people who are victims of human trafficking. I saw people working hard and falling victim to economic exploitation. In the faces of these men, I saw my father. My father was white and didn't have dark skin. My father was Christian, not Muslim. My father was a migrant, and his work was very close to the house where we lived. But both my father and these Pakistani workers are victims of the same brutality, the same social conditions, and the same exploitation. The film does two things. It attempts to bring to light people who are invisible and at the same time are victims of economic exploitation. Perhaps this is why they must remain invisible forever. And it also brings to light the tragedy of shipwreck involving migrant victims, which occurred in a Greek maritime area and is closely linked to the film's protagonists. Regarding this shipwreck in Greece, the law of silence prevails, just as it does regarding the pushbacks of migrants in the Aegean Sea. When you talk about these issues in Greece, you are more or less considered an enemy of your homeland. I have faced several unpleasant situations when bringing up topics in public discourse that the government or decision-making centers don't want to be heard. But I persist because I feel is what I must do. I'm aware of my mission and have an unshakable determination to continue. Cemre.
Reflection, and it was important that well, I guess the sound will echo, huh?
So unfortunately, they have 5 seconds. Okay.
Sure. Your highlight was important that you noted that these sort of human rights documentaries, reportings make visible in the eyes of our global
Yes.
community. I think we must expect more from the global governance systems, making sure that the new home countries, new hosts do have systems, resources available to these newcomers so that they can thrive their professional capacities or whichever skills that they bring from back home. I think this will help us mitigate the problem of poverty that you highlighted. So moving on, Thomas, you also elaborate on xenophobia and the cultural integration of these newcomers, Pakistani refugees, asylum seekers in your film Gas Station. And that was lovely that you also resembled some of your personal stories from the traces that your father had to take to support his family. So please tell us what similarities you observe between the particular journey of Muhammad and the other displaced individuals that you documented their stories before, or some of the common challenges that you report newcomers are encountering in their new homelands.
Cemre, thank you for your question. Almost all my cinematic protagonists share common characteristics and similar journeys in their lives. Migration, whether due to war, economic hardship, or climate change, has the same social and psychological impact. A common feature of migrants is that while they traverse geographical space, they carry within them the social space or fragments of it. At each stop, in every enclave where they visit, they create various spatial representations that reference the place they left behind and reflect their expectations and dreams. No one leaves their home and no one risks their life without a cause. Thus, an economic or climate migrant from Haiti crossing the Caribbean, a Turkish political migrant crossing a river to reach Greece, a Pakistani or Afghan migrant boarding a small boat to cross from Turkey to Greece, or a Syrian migrant leaving their village in fear of being slaughtered by jihadists, all have reasons for doing so and all face similar hardships. Unfortunately, despite the rapid technological advancement in the world, we live in the prevailing doctrine remains one of deep social inequality and the exclusion of an increasing number of people from wealth. The deeper social inequality grows, the deeper human suffering will become. Political and social elites don't care about invisible people. It's a boxing match of political power, but behind every form of power lies economic exploitation. What might show this situation, however, is climate change, which primarily affects the poor but spares no one. What they belong, you know, 1% of the world has all the rich, but the life is for the 99% for all humanity.
Your comment that no one risks their lives unless the cold waters of Evros or any other sea or river is safer than their homeland. So thank you so much for reminding us on this important fact. And Thomas, lastly, on my opening remarks, I noted that there has been a grave crackdown of social and political rights in Turkey over the last decade, as Turkey is alarmingly disregarding the pillars of democracy, with an immense political pressure controlling public institutions. And I know that you're also very closely linked with Turkish communities seeked protection, asylum in Greece. So I would appreciate, receiving your insights or any best practices that you observed from Turkish communities, Hizmet community, or Kurds that seeked protection in Greece. Any stories or civil society best practices that you would like to share, led by refugees?
I think that my first film about human rights in Turkey, The News, or İlmik in Turkish, changed my life. All of this time, Said Onal sent me photos from Pennsylvania, from Central Penn College. The Turkish migrants, Emre, who came to Greece in recent years, especially after 2014, with a peak during the period between 2016, had all the characteristics of political migrants. They left their country for political reasons after the sudden shift in the Turkish government and the targeting of specific social groups, which were not minorities, but a large portion of the population. It was no longer just the Kurds or left-wing citizens. It also included teachers, academics, journalists, many journalists, and military personnel. At the same time, the constitution in Turkey was changed, granting the president a limited power, especially over in the system of justice. Many people found themselves in a position either to change their ideas and live the rest of their lives in silence, or to leave the country. Greece was a nearby destination, but migration there was not always easy. Turkish citizens left as illegal migrants, and there are many cases where people died on the road or entire families were lost in the waters of a river, I mean Evros River. I don't remember the name in Turkish. These situations were very unpleasant. However, in recent years, there have been Turkish communities, big Turkish communities in Athens and Thessaloniki. Turkish migrants, like any migrant, first have to overcome the shock. Suddenly, they find themselves in a situation where they left everything behind, and in front of them are unknown people and an unknown geographical and social space. They leave behind their home, their habits, their friends, their family members. Often with no money at all, they must survive, find a meal, and find a place to stay. For most migrants, none of this is guaranteed. Many Turkish citizens may have had some money with them, perhaps in a better situation than an Afghan migrant. But many Turks also arrived with no money at all. I think that in the case of Turkish migrants, the solidarity networks that already existed worked very well, which greatly helped with their initial settlement. Certainly, the social integration of migrants does not happen overnight. It takes time, perhaps 8 to 10 years, before we can say that these people have fully integrate in the social environment. Many Turkish migrants started their own business, engaged in trade or services like real estate. However, the violent separation from one's home and homeland will always remain an open wound. This is my opinion because I have approximately daily touch with these people, with Turkish people who live in Greece, in Athens and Thessaloniki cities.
It's that's what we need. And when I was in Athens, I was lucky to meet with colleagues who established refugees themselves, but established Piggy and Bridges of Peace in Athens. Now giving a hand to the other people in need, striping themselves off of their refugee IDs, but relocalize themselves into Greek communities and continuing their civil society efforts. So thank you so much for your reflections.
And I think that Turkish
Yes.
migrants are very closely with other migrants who live in Greece. For example, communities of migrants who live in camps outskirts of Thessaloniki. Because in Thessaloniki we have the
Thank you so
biggest
much. And
Turkish
please
community in
continue
Greece.
writing in the chat. I would like to read one of the comments. The film reminds me of the conditions of the World War II refugees, immigrants in the coal mine areas of Belgium in the early 1950s. Though through my parents, refugees and immigrants themselves managed to stay slightly above and on the side of that, I walked among it as a 4 or 5 years of child. Thank you so much.
It's very important. It's a very important note, and
we'll transition into Q&A as well. Please be active in the chat. Thank you so much, Thomas. Please, if possible, remain with us for the Q&A as well. So I'll be moving with Lefteris Papagiannakis. He is the director of the Greek Council for Refugees. In 2014 and named vice mayor on migrant and refugee affairs from 2016 to 19. Mr. Papagiannakis served as the president of the Council for the Integration of Migrants at the Municipality of Athens. And since 2017, he has been a member of the board of the Hellenic League for Human Rights. And formerly, Mr. Papagiannakis worked in the European Parliament on the education of children of the Muslim minority in Greece as a legal counselor for the political party Ecologists, Green, and the Special Secretariat on Environmental Inspection. Lefteris, thank you so much for joining this night's discussion section as well. As you lead this pioneering human rights organization working on protecting the rights of refugees and leading programs on their empowerment, I would appreciate if you can please inform us on the interventions, what forms of actions do Greek Council for Refugees take, and as an entity affiliated with ECOSOC, United Nations Economic and Social Council, what forms of strategic partnerships do you establish with other intergovernmental entities and NGOs?
Thank you, Cemre. Thank you also to the organizers for inviting the Greek Council for Refugees. Thank you, Thomas, for the incredible film. And many thanks to the audience who is here today with us, live or online. The Greek Council for Refugees is the oldest NGO in Greece dealing with the rights and the support of asylum seekers and refugees. We are offering mainly legal support, so we are mainly a legal organization, but we also do social work, psychological support. We have a big unit of interpretation because without interpreters, our work would be almost impossible. Most of our colleagues are former refugees. Most of them now are Greeks, which is a sign, if you want, of the possibility that social integration offers to people, and giving opportunity to people always pays out, if you want, if I can use this terminology. We collaborate with a number of partners in Greece, but also in the context of the European Union. We are a long-standing partner of UNHCR. We are a partner of the International Organization for Migration. Of course, we have a large network of colleagues in Greece, but we also participate in the context of advocacy. That is also a big part of our work in umbrella NGOs like the European Council for Refugees and Exilees, PICUM, which is a platform for undocumented migrants, etc. We also do, and this is probably the most impactful part of our work, we also do strategic litigation, meaning important cases that are brought in front of the European Court for Human Rights or the Court of the EU, which is a bit more complicated, but it also happens. Our latest big case, but we are still waiting for a ruling, concerns a pushback of one of our I cannot use the word clients, but one of our people who seek for our help. She's actually from Turkey, and she was pushed back in 2019. We presented the case on June 4th. We are waiting for the ruling. If the ruling is favorable, it will mean that Greece will be recognized as guilty to violations of international law. This happened to Cyprus a few weeks ago, and we have a number of other cases pending. So this is very, very briefly what we do. It's also everyday work with people who seek asylum, because we have an open door policy, meaning that everyone can seek assistance from the Greek Council. And as I mentioned, we've been doing this for a very long time, more than 30 years. We were established by the first woman director of UNHCR back in 1989. Our founder passed away a few years ago at the age of 103, meaning she lived a very good life, offering back to society, which is something that we cherish and we try to, fulfill every day when we work, remembering that she took the initiative to start. It is a challenging, as you can understand, work. Thomas mentioned that people who do this type of work, human rights defenders in general, in Greece, but also in Europe and around the world, are facing very important challenges. We are considered to be enemies of the state, traitors, promoting the approach of Turkey in the context of migration, etc., etc. So we are targeted, we are vilified, and it's something that we need to live with and face, and in the same time protect our colleagues who are facing also. We have colleagues who are facing criminal charges as members of trafficking rings. So it's a complicated reality, especially since 2015. When what we called the refugee crisis. You will allow me to disagree completely with the term. It was not a refugee crisis. It was a reception crisis, maybe a political crisis or a social crisis. It was not a refugee crisis, because if you compare what happened in 2015 and what happened in 2022 with Ukraine, where 8 million people crossed into Europe, you cannot say that 1 million people is a crisis and 8 million people is not a crisis. So it's also something that we need to keep in mind, that the discussion around migration is very, very political, which is correct. I mean, it's a political discussion, but how you do this political discussion can lead people into thinking that one is a problem, but the other is something normal. So we need to do also the discussion at some point, and we need to look very hard at the mirror and decide what are the choices that we have to make. So very briefly, this is what we do.
Tireless work, because we know that global entities may lack strong local connections with the migrants, and this may cause some gaps in delivering services to the communities in need. So your presence, your local engagements are very critical and important. And you have mentioned something that recently took place in the latest report of United Nations Special Rapporteur Mary Lovrol on working on the protection of human rights defenders, and she also noted the same thing, increasing stigmatization of human rights defenders and allegedly labeling them as foreign agents or enemies of state, like you underlined, is one of the increasing threats that we as civil society members, human rights advocates are unfortunately encountering on doing our job reporting on these systemic state-led violations. So thank you so much on that emphasis. And moving on, we also saw some scenes from the Philos case, the shipwreck that was overloaded with more than 750 people, and it eventually tragically sank in the cold waters around the beaches of Greece. It took place back in June 2013 that killed countless of refugees. We don't really know the exact number because investigations are lagging behind. And I'm sure that your leading organization is involved in this case too. So please keep us posted on the latest status of this investigation. And I would appreciate if you can provide more information on this particular catastrophe and the latest progress, international progress.
Yeah, thank you. We are representing, along with colleagues from other NGOs, 53 survivors who filed a complaint, a criminal complaint against the authorities. The investigation is still pending. We are waiting, we are going to get the case report because we are representing survivors, us and our other three colleagues. As you know, 102 people survived. So more than half have filed the criminal complaint. We are waiting for the case, and then we will be waiting for the decision of the public prosecutor, who will decide on whether to press charges or file the case into the archive. If the case goes to the archive, we will file immediately the case in front of the European Court of Human Rights. If not, we will continue with the national procedures and then probably decide to move on to the European Court. It will take time. These cases take too long, as you know, especially if we present the case in front of the European Court. Many details have to be covered. A number of technical issues have to be presented in front of the court. But there is also a parallel procedure from the Greek ombudsman, who is looking into the actions or inactions of the Coast Guard. We know that the ombudsman, has called the former head of the Coast Guard to, for his testimony, and the ombudsman took over because the Coast Guard itself refused to do the necessary internal investigation to see what happened. So we have two parallel things happening, and in the same time, we had back in May the trial of 9 people who were accused of being the traffickers. All of them have been acquitted. And now we have a journalist report, a journalist investigation, proving, at least according to the report, that the Greek authorities knew from day one that these 9 people were not involved, and they were targeted because it was the easiest thing to do. And usually, people who are on boats may be obliged by the traffickers to, to lead or to drive the boat, etc. So these 9 people from Egypt were acquitted, and now they will be on the side of the survivors, looking to be vindicated. So it's a long process, but we are hopeful that at some point we will have a clear picture of the case file, and we will be able to read into the results of the investigation and decide which points can be pursued in justice. It's a very, very long process, trust me. The previous case that we took, which was a similar shipwreck with, excuse me for being blunt and cynical, there were less dead. There were 11 people who died back in the shipwreck in 2014. The case was pending for 8 years, and we got an answer in 2022. We won. It was one of our cases also, and the Greek state was recognized as responsible, the Coast Guard and of course the state, for the death of these 11 people, and also the fact that the Greek state didn't do the proper investigation and didn't proceed as, it is, they didn't follow due process. So these things take a long time. Fortunately, if I can use this word, international attention is on this case because it was a horrific event. As you know, in June, we had a BBC report, a very long documentary of 1 hour and a half, presenting the case and details that many people didn't know. And it's something that will remain, I mean, in the minds of people for a very long time. It was the biggest shipwreck in the Mediterranean, and it's not only the size of the number of the victims. It's that the boat is now lying at the deepest end of the Mediterranean. It's over 5,000 meters off the coast of Kalamata, of the Peloponnese in Greece. And apparently, there were some things that happened that led to the unfortunate deaths of all these people. So we are following, of course, because it's our case, very closely, and hopefully we will have news. I cannot say it when, but hopefully very soon.
Seeking justice at the international human rights bodies are unfortunately time consuming, but your work is very critical because lack of accountability is only empowering perpetrators, and member states are replicating such violations, following the traces of similar violations. So many thanks for your interventions and representing the survivors. And lifters, lastly, and I would appreciate if you can keep your interventions brief. In my opening remarks, I noted that the systemic decline of democracies and the parallel rise of autocracies really boosts this refugee crisis or displacement, forced displacement. What other root causes would you like to underline tonight that encourages or induces, so to say, people to leave their homelands besides political repression?
Look, for us, one of the big issues that we are looking into, and we have a small report out, and we are starting a second one, passing to the second part of our research, is climate. So we are looking into climate change as a cause of displacement. We find in a number of interviews when we talk to people on the reasons why they moved, many times, increasingly at least, the underlying reason is climate, as we see. I mean, the lack of water, the lack of land to cultivate, extreme heat, etc. So all of these reasons that we, also in Europe, we see them. I mean, for the first time last year in Greece, we had internally displaced people because of a flood in the central region of Greece. So we know that this is coming, and we see it as an underlying cause. We are looking into it, and we believe that in following years we will see more people. I mean, there is a report already from an institute that points to that 6.6 million people were displaced because of climate in 2023, compared to the 120 million people who are going to be displaced by the end of 2024, according to UNHCR. It's less than 10%, it's 5%, I think, but this number is increasing rapidly. And we believe that in the next years, everyone knows it. I mean, it's not something that we only found out. We know that in the years to come, climate is going to be a very important root cause. And if you combine these two realities, climate and migration, and it's the perfect storm. I mean, if migration causes such a political turmoil, at least in the context of the EU, where I know it better, but also you can look at what is happening in the US. If migration on its own is causing such a political turmoil, imagine if two major events or two global challenges combine, because we know that these two realities interact, if you want, and feed into each other. You have human mobility towards developed countries. That means that developed countries are causing climate change, and it will cause even more people to move. So it's a vicious circle. It's I don't know how to call it, but it's a vicious circle of events that will cause more, that will lead more people to move, even by force, not only by choice. So this is something that we are looking into closely. We hope that we will have the opportunity to present some results, and we believe that in the years to come, this will be a main point of discussion.
Well, thank you so much. for raising an awareness on the intersectionality between climate crisis and the rest of the sustainable development goals, or forced displacement. And the climate crisis also induce many gender-related barriers, as well as women and girls are disproportionately impacted by this crisis. I'm pretty sure this is also reflected on the number of displaced individuals. Well, I highly appreciate your reflections, and we'll come back to you in the Q&A session. So moving on, I'll have reflections of Joyce Davis, and the opinion editor for Penn Live and the Patriot News. She has a distinguished career working for some of the most respected media organizations in the United States. She is also the president and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg. Ms. Davis has appeared on many national and international news programs and was frequently called to speak as an international affairs expert. An award-winning journalist and internationally acclaimed author who has lived and worked around the globe, she has received 4 honorary doctorate degrees. Well, Joyce, thank you so much, and I appreciate your partnerships in convening this event as well. Well, let's now localize this global outlook that we have been discussing over the last 30-40 minutes on the historic increase of refugees. And I would love to receive your reflections from the US perspective covering this issue. And migration has been among the top 3 issues that was raised in the recent elections that we had by the Republican election campaign strategy, portrayed as a security issue. So how do you think boosting this public discourse will further polarize or impact our social engagement here in States?
Well, most Americans see migration and immigration as a security issue. No matter but what many fail to understand is the why. They don't see they don't have the compassion to see the suffering that leads people to leave their homes and to go into places where, yes, they will be desperate. Yes, if you can steal a piece of bread for your child, you will do it, right? I think Americans have not stopped to understand really, and we know this. We know Americans are extraordinarily ignorant of the world. We know that many don't even care about what goes on around the world. And so this is of a concern. This is why documentaries like what Tom has done and others, it's important that we bring this into our communities, into these local communities, so that people can better understand. And if you have a heart, you have to look at that person who's fleeing flooding, who's fleeing fires, who's fleeing guns, who's fleeing catastrophe. You should look at them with compassion and how can we help? And no one country should have to take on the whole burden, but together the rich nations certainly are able to help solve this problem. It is solvable if you have the heart to do so.
Thank you. Your reflections are very parallel to the emphasis of the gas station as well. You noted that this seeing the invisible must be embraced in our society here in States too. And I also agree on your comment that we should foster more dialogue, localized dialogue, to ensure that personalizing the resilience stories of newcomers are well represented. Well, moving on representation, and as a professional, media professional who has worked abroad, supervised reporters from the most chaotic nations like Iran and Afghanistan, where the press freedom is under detrimental political pressure, I would appreciate receiving your reflections on the role of media organizations and the media literacy that journalists, reporters are using to cover refugee crisis. Do you see any gaps in the media discourse?
Huge gaps, but this is why what the work that Tom is doing and journalists that really are well grounded, and not only in history but in these regions. This is why what they're doing is so important, because there is a gap in the reporting in the United States and in many parts of the world about what's going on. We have a weak press now, unfortunately, in the United States. The press is under attack. And unfortunately, it's not only under attack from political forces who want to weaken it, who don't want the truth out, but the average person is not knowledgeable enough to know where to go to get accurate information. So they're getting it on a tweet, or they're getting it sent to them by sources that are basically disinformation sources. They are people that are trying to deceive, that are trying to basically lie to the American or to any public that will. And that makes it even more important that the media that is really responsible do its job, and do its job with a vigor, and not be silent. And I'm really pleased to see that that's what's happening, at least in some circles, like in Greece.
Mhm. Thank you. These very important reflections, because the rate of disinformation really spreads way faster than credible resources, trustworthy media organizations, information networks. So, and maybe a follow-up question on this. What do you think about the role of citizen journalism as citizens?
I mean, I think citizen journalism is fine, but you have to understand that you know as well as I that a journalist is trained. They're trained in how to ask the right questions, how to question whether there's another side to the story, and how to present it in a way that is balanced. Frequently, what we find as citizen journalists is they're giving one side, they're giving their side. And that's fine for one thing, that's your opinion, but it's not necessarily reporting and getting to the truth in the heart of the matter.
This may even maybe contributing to the
Misinformation.
disinformation trends.
Yeah.
But I think this is a new phenomenon that we can't really stop. So maybe our organizations must do more work on how to improve the media literacy skills of everyday citizens who are interested in being a part of this.
And we have to
journalism.
we have to recapture the trust of people. People will go the information to people that they trust. So how can we let them know that here is someone you can depend upon? I'm not going to lie to you. If I make a mistake, I will tell you I made a mistake. That's what we have to do in this country for sure.
Thank you. So lastly, our conversation today really revolved around the issue of refugee rights, increasing displacement. We have talked about the root causes of this crisis, but today also marks the International Human Rights Day. And as a media professional, as an expert on international affairs, what other critical human rights violations you would like to underline tonight as we gather with friends, colleagues here in college, Central Penn College, and over Zoom? What are the other priorities that we must keep a close eye on?
Well, right now we know, of course, for you and I, we care about women's rights around the world. We care about democracy, and it's the threat that is going on there. We very much are concerned, at least in our country and locally, about whether we are seeing the rule of law, our constitution, and all of that basically being devalued. And that's a big concern, because if a country as big and powerful as the United States moves away from rule of law and democracy, that's going to have reverberations around the world. It is going to impact not only the free world, but the countries the developing world that's struggling, because they will have no model. They'll have no one to look up to. So right now, I think everybody's worried about what's the future of democracy, even in countries that claim to be democratic.
Definitely. And thank you so much for underlining gender equality and women's rights as well. The recent reports of UN notes that it's going to take another 100 years to close this gap. So this is not a fact to share so that we leave our premises, but no, foster our international collaborations to fill in this gap as soon as possible. So I would appreciate if my colleague can assist me if we have any questions at Zoom, or anybody in the audience here, if you would like to share any reflections about the topics that we have discussed, or any questions particularly for Joyce Davis or Thomas Sideris or Lefteris, please, this is the time to share reflections, or anybody in the Zoom. Would you like to join in this thing? No? Okay. Well, then I will have to pass the mic.
Can you repeat the question? Actually, you don't have to. You can repeat the question for them.
It's just a quick question, but yeah, thank you so much, Thomas. It was a very touching documentary. I really enjoyed, but it was not very easy to watch. And Lefteris, thank you for your work over there. I have a question regarding um, how you address the potential concerns about these crisis. This you say that it's not a crisis, but this displacement coming from other countries. The potential concern from local people. How do you integrate these refugees to the society, and how locals are embracing or basically accepting these people? Just how social integration is happening.
That was an important question. Thank you so much. Lefteris, would you like to start? I hope the question was heard clear.
Yeah, of course. It is one of the big challenges for Greece. I have to start by saying, first of all, that we have a policy gap in the context of social integration. We don't have a national integration policy, and this is a very general response. But in the same time, we have to take into account and to be realistic, Greece in 2010 entered a real crisis, the financial crisis that lasted unfortunately for 10 years. In the middle of it, we faced what we call the refugee crisis. By the end of the refugee crisis, COVID started. And with COVID, then we had the invasion of Russia in Ukraine, which caused another financial crisis because of the rise of the energy prices. So it's a vicious circle of crisis within a crisis within a crisis. And we have children in Greece and people in Greece that for the last 12 years at least never had anything else but the word crisis in different contexts. So keeping this in mind, we have to understand and acknowledge that sometimes it's very challenging to explain or to convince people that it is necessary to do more for others. And the discussion about identities, who are the others, xenophobia, etc. If you combine all of these challenges, it's a very, it's an explosive cocktail. And just to give a very simple example, in 2016 in Lesbos, the island of solidarity, as you know, the grandmothers of Lesbos who saved the babies, we were, this system, this reality was a candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize. In 2019, in the same island of Lesbos, we saw signs on public beaches saying that refugees are not allowed to swim here, reminding us of 1950s Alabama, South America, the southern of the United States, a racist approach. And this was due to from the one side to the solidarity fatigue, on the other side to some social, reflexes, and on top of that, the lack of policy. And the policy doesn't come only for NGOs and civil society and international organizations. Policy comes from the state. And if the state is absent, deliberately or not, because the state cannot cope or chooses not to cope, in this gap, we have this reality emerging. And this is very, very challenging. And we have to convince everyone that dealing with and working for social integration is part of the work that we need to do for resilience and for sustainable development. It's a complex reality, and it's becoming even more complex if you take into account the role of media, the speed of information, social media, etc. All of these elements together, it's an explosive cocktail. In the context of a country that is not very big and doesn't have a lot of capacity, but is the outer border of the EU. And migration is used also as a political instrument, a political weapon, an instrument of foreign policy, of European policy, etc. All of these elements together make things very, very complicated.
And we faced a humanistic crisis in Syria now. Yes, Jemre, can you hear me? Jemre, I'm here. We are not only, we have the war in Gaza, we have migrants in Lebanon, Many people moved now from North Syria to South. Many Kurds people. We are faced with a deep humanistic crisis in Syria. And don't forget that, Lefteris, the European Union, many European countries changed the status about asylum in Syrian refugees. It's a very important situation at this moment in Europe. And not only of these open war fronts, we have in front of us the climate change and all of these people who will move. Don't forget, for example, about Haitian refugees in my film Marabout, the situation in 2019 is the same situation today. The same problems, the same refugees, the same people who can pass all of this passage in during the Caribbean geographical space.
I want to make sure that we take one from the Zoom as well. Are you planning to work on any documentary in the near future highlighting the best practices of refugees, their successful stories being integrated into their host community?
It's a brilliant idea, and maybe I will work on it. My next project is absolutely different about refugees.
Grateful to hear that. Joyce, do you have any closing reflections?
Nope, I want to thank everyone for actually sharing their expertise and their knowledge. Thank those who came out on a rainy night to participate in this. It's so important. It's so important that we do our part to educate and to support each other, to let people around the world, refugees and those who are supporting refugees, know they have help. They have people who really care.
Thank you. Well, wrapping up our discussion tonight, I would like to end by acknowledging the challenges that refugees are encountering in Greece and in many other parts of the world. And I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to fantastic human rights organizations in Greece, journalists, reporters, and the great Greek community. I know the challenges persist in polarized societies, but at the end of the day, there are many, many wonderful Greek people, neighbors who are opening their doors to share a hot meal, help the others maybe to translate their legal documents or being conversation partners. There are various ways to boost this inclusive dialogue among the societies. And we know that every sovereign state has its political priorities when it comes to the topic of refugees and foreign affairs. But as I noted, at the end of the day, despite the challenges, we have amazing people in host communities, host societies, being wonderful neighbors for the newcomers. Thomas, Lefteris, Joyce, thank you so much. It's been an amazing discussion, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful to all of you about this screening today, Human Rights Day. Thank you very much. Joyce, thank you. Said Onar, Mehmet Kilic.